Hello and welcome to the Codemasters HQ in Birmingham. I'm here with Lee Mather, the Senior Creative Director at EA Sports/Codemasters.
Something that we've had sort of fed back to us several times over the last few years has been that traction in a Formula One car is absolutely astronomical. And that's something that we hadn't achieved in the game to the level that we wanted. So as part and parcel of all of the changes we've made to the physics this year, a more stable car is something that we've really gained from that.
Oh, it's a bit more friendly as well on the exits.
Definitely. So again, partially down to the changes to the tyre model, partially down to the fact that now that weight transfer and the anti-squat and the anti-dive in the suspension, in that case the anti-dive obviously helping to keep the rear stable and have traction.
Yeah.
It really came from the feedback we were getting from the drivers that the stability in the cars is way higher than we probably even expected.
Yeah.
That traction is way more impressive than we ever expected. And again, braking is something we've always been pretty solid at, but they always said traction in a Formula One car is incredible, and that's something that we've now been able to achieve.
You can really feel the sort of the bumps and the energy going through the car a lot more than last year.
Yeah, and that's very much down to the changes we've made to not only where the centre of mass sits, which is now more realistic, but through the suspension as well. So the suspension kinematics, in the fact that it now allows the car to roll and pitch more effectively, but also you can feel that sort of come through the wheel as well.
Absolutely, I was getting that judder through Eau Rouge, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of like patter from the wheel and the tyre. Yeah, it's really nice the way it sort of transfers that weight and it loads up the front or the rear. Weight transfer is really important in racing and in a racing game. So again, we've modelled that more effectively this year with the suspension changes.
Yeah. Oh, little twitch there. But it's controllable.
Yeah.
It is controllable, and you get that snap. I think other F1 games before, you've had to be really sort of gentle and tentative and almost treat the throttle as this sort of monster that you have to tease into doing your bidding, you know?
Yeah, and also I think in the rotation of the car, the way it feels now, it's got a really positive direct front end, which in the past would have meant the rear, you were chasing the rear.
Absolutely.
But we've got a really nice stability and balance to the car. And you'll certainly find that, getting on the throttle is a lot easier. But also, when the car does snap and it does rotate, you've got the ability to catch it and it'll feel natural.
You really feel that the weight change as you throw it into a corner. You really feel the movement and the, how you would call it, the sort of the energy of the car moving from one to the other.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that the changes in the tyre model make it quite clear as well. Obviously, you're in time trial at the moment, so there's no temperatures on, but you'll certainly be feeling the additional front end bite that we've modelled into the tyres this year. You'll certainly feel the front end is really positive.
I heard that new little sound then from the tyres.
You got a chirp from the tyres.
I did. A new chirp.
Yeah, so we want to obviously, if you're not sat in a real car, so we want to use all of the mechanisms we've got to convey to you what that car's doing. Yeah. So in this case here, you've got a force feedback steering wheel, but you hear what the tyres are doing, which is equally as important, because we can't obviously make you feel it through the seat of your pants, but you can feel it through the wheel, you can hear it through the audio.
Do you think the setup is going to be more important than ever in this year's game?
I think if you're playing at a competitive level, I think that's definitely where you've got to go, isn't it? You've got to go and find the extra tenths. Yep. But in terms of pick up and play, the base setups in the game are really strong. They're really comfortable for people to use, and you'll be able to race great in sort of My Team, Driver Career, any of the other offline game modes, time trial, for example. But if you are looking for that competitive edge, then you go into the car setup and you start looking at those changes. I think something we'll find this year is that players will experiment a lot more with the setups because of the changes we've made to the way that the aero works. Yeah. We often found that in the competitive sort of arena, players stuck with generally very similar setups, but I think there'll be a lot more variation. And I think in somewhere like Spa, where you often see that in real life, sometimes teams will try and find more time during the slightly slower part of the track, and other times they'll bias their setup to almost a Monza-esque setup, where they find the big gain is in the really fast sections. It's not often about which is the fastest, it's about having the one that you're most comfortable with to be able to extract the most performance out of it for your driving style, and I think that's something that we'll see players doing a lot more of. There's also that intelligence as well, that ability to manipulate and use the systems that are available in the car. So you mentioned the ride height, that's plays a huge part, especially the rake on a Formula One car, in how it performs with the ground effect of the aero, but also the level of drag. So that's really important. But also the ERS, and you mentioned the D rating, but also in the aero balance as well. And I think players who play at that sort of more sort of skilled end of the scale, they'll be definitely looking to find new setups for the cars this year, because the way that the pitch and the roll impacts the aero is quite significant. The DRS effectiveness is obviously adjusted based on, if you've got a car running high drag, your DRS is going to be more effective than a car running lower levels of downforce with less drag. So all of those things will play into it. So we want people to have a really nice, stable, solid car to drive from the off, and then to have the ability to perform better, to perform more quickly on the circuits through the car setup and the systems that are available to them. Because now we've got such effective suspension, and that the car and the pitch and roll of the car adjusts, we wanted to make it so that the aero setup that a player can now manipulate when they're setting the car up has a more significant impact. So obviously, if I'm making those changes, we wanted to ensure that they're realistically applied to the car. So if you're changing the front wing, that applies it correctly to that part of the car. So very much using the CFD, the computational fluid dynamics, and a virtual rolling road gave the handling team the opportunity to balance the aero, so that's why we've got a really nice aero balance. But again, players can adjust that to suit how they want the car to feel. If they want something way looser, we often see some of the esports drivers run really loose setups, and to us mere mortals, they're really on the edge all the time. But it's how they extract that extra little bit of performance.
Oh, it's still holding through there.
Yeah, it's that real confidence to push the car now that we've got, which is really nice. And it comes from, again, the changes to the aero modelling. You've got that real confidence to push through those fast corners. But as you said through the bus stop, you've still got that feeling of a Formula One car being clumsy at low speeds,
absolutely,
where it's not about the aero. The ERS, and you mentioned the D rating, so D rating being the concept that the batteries are charging rather than delivering the power. In the game now, when you see that car ahead in the distance and the little red light on the back's flashing, you know that they're starting to harvest, and it's like, well, they're obviously trying to harvest for a reason, although they may be low on power. So you see them as like, right, now's the chance to really push and catch that other car. So yeah, the ability to really use the ERS to generate exciting racing and really give those opportunities to overtake or defend, it really does mix the racing up nicely. And the engine braking, so Lando, obviously his personal preference there being less, it also has an impact on the charging as well, because obviously the more engine braking, the more you're generating that heat as well, which in the current world of Formula One does generate energy for the MGU. So it definitely makes a difference, and also the way the differential works as well. If you've got more engine braking, the diffs fighting differently against it. So again, all of those changes impact the way that the car drives, the way that it puts the power down, and the way it rotates in the corner as well.
Oh, and the MFD's a little bit different as well.
Yeah, remodelled this year to take into account the changes we've made to the ERS. So the players got more insight into what the ERS is doing, because the fact that now they have more control over it, more agency. You need to know what it's doing, you need to understand it.
I think a lot of people will be very surprised by the difference in the feel. But I think the main thing is just how much more confidence you can have in not just the slow corners, but also the fast corners as well. So thank you for talking me through the gameplay there, I really appreciate it.
Cool, no problem.